Welcome back to Red Pen of Destiny. We are covering new band of the year for 1971, Dr. Feelgood. We're, of course, leading up to doing a full retrospective of the best band of each decade, first being the 70s. So we're working our way through sort of a sampler of a band from each year. 1971, I thought I'd pick Dr. Feelgood. I was this close to doing Roxy music, and then realized that they actually started in 1970. So, and if you understand how years work correctly, the 0 year is not part of the decade. It is part of the old decade. So it's 2020 now. We are at the end of the decade. The end of the decade is not 2019. Okay? There was no year 0. So the 10th year is, yeah, never mind. Anyway. But yeah, so this is the first year of the 1970s. So we are going to cover all of them. So, Dr. Feelgood are part of the British pub rock movement of the early 70s, kind of a successor to the British Invasion. And Dr. Feelgood are one of the big bands of the scene, which basically became the punk scene by the end of the 70s. And you can see a lot of influence, especially in bands like The Jam. They were the big ones, though in many other bands as well. I suppose the Stranglers are kind of similar. Some of the bands that kind of skirted the punk thing, they weren't quite punk, but they came around at the right time, so they got slotted into punk. But yeah, I'm a big fan of some of their work. I'm a big fan of the guitarist, Wilco Johnson. Well, at least when he was in the band. Because you see all those members listed there? That's the classic lineup. None of those people are in the band anymore. That's kind of strange. But I really like the original vocalist, Lee Brelu, who is the tall feller there, second from right. And Wilco, who's on the left there, who, interestingly, actually was in Game of Thrones, which surprised me. He also did an album with Roger Daltrey from The Who, so he gets around. But yeah, he was a mute executioner in Game of Thrones, which came as a surprise to me. And then we also have John V. Sparks, far right, on bass, and John Martin, also known as the Big Figure, on drums. And he has a good coolness about him, as you can see by that picture. You just glasses. He sells the quiet, cool drummer role. I don't even know if that's what he's like, but that's the impression I get from him. And they have quite a few classic songs. A good Dr. Feelgood song has a lot of energy. It has a great riff. Wilco is constantly going forwards and backwards on the stage as he plays in one of their good songs. Great example, this song "She Does It Right" from their first album, Down by the Jetty, has an excellent riff, and it's just fun rock and roll type of environment. They delve into blues and rock and roll quite a lot, even covering some of the classics from each genre. Notably, Route 66. What was it? Boom Boom by John Lee Hooker. So they kind of go into the blues and the rock and roll and everything. And then they get into some weird stuff as well. Also from the first album, the song Roxette, which I think was their debut single, is not quite as good as She Does It Right from the same album, but I really like it. It really works. And then my personal favorite off of Private Practice, Milk and Alcohol, which I think is probably one of their bigger songs. I put it on my my driving playlist because Dr. Feelgood are very good at having songs that are very driving. So I'm a big fan of that song. Interestingly, it was their last single. They did a special remix version of it. Or at least it's the last single listed on Wikipedia. I don't know how updated it is. Their Wikipedia page is a little bit of a mess. Like live albums, compilations, all mixed into one list, which is a terrible idea. Um, but they're kind of one of those bands that like had their classic period, but they just refused to stop making music, and then they went downhill, and all of the original members have left, and then I don't know what's going on with them now. But they're definitely worth checking out if you like rock and roll, punk. They don't really have any influence to metal, because obviously they were around the same time as Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, but they're so traditional that they are like still predating metal, even though they're around at the same time as metal. I mean, their first album is 1975. Like, that's pretty far into the metal history already. But they're still playing good old fashioned rock and roll. I believe they have some connection to Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, just a little bit, who were one of the classic British rock and roll bands. But definitely worth checking out. Probably not the best band of the 70s because they have to compete with Iron Maiden, who started in 1975, I think. Joy Division, who started in the late 70s. Um, yeah, that's not really going to help them. They do not have to compete with Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Rush, or Judas Priest, though, because they all started in the 60s, just for Judas Priest and Rush. So the competition isn't super up there, but we'll definitely have to see what we end up doing.